The Unspoken Chronicle, Chapter 1, The Echo of a Farewell. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, 1985. The autumn air, crisp and biting, carried the scent of fallen leaves and the distant murmur of city life. 10-year-old Sarah Miller stood on the worn porch of her grandmother's Victorian house, her small hand clutching a much-loved, slightly battered teddy bear named Barnaby. Her grandmother, Eliza, a woman with eyes that held the wisdom of 1,000 untold stories, and hands that always smelled faintly of lavender and old paper, knelt before her, her face etched with a familiar, gentle sorrow. "My sweet Sarah," Eliza whispered, her voice like rustling silk. "Remember what I told you. The stories. They live on, even when we can't speak them. They become part of the air we breathe, the ground we walk on." Sarah nodded, though she didn't quite understand. Her mother, a practical woman who believed in order and logic, had often dismissed Eliza's tales as the ramblings of an old woman, fueled by too much time alone with her books. But Sarah loved them, loved the way Eliza would spin tales of ancestors who communed with nature, of hidden messages in antique lace, of coincidences that were truly fate. Eliza was her refuge, her enchanted garden in a world that often felt too structured and dull. But now, the garden was shrinking. Eliza was moving. Not far, just to a smaller apartment in the city, closer to Sarah's mother, who insisted she needed more care. To Sarah, it felt like an exile. Her grandmother's house, with its towering bookshelves and secret nooks, was a universe. The apartment her mother had described was merely a room. Before they left the house for the final time, Eliza had led Sarah to a secluded corner of the sprawling, overgrown garden beneath the ancient, weeping willow tree. The earth there was soft, dark with years of fallen leaves. Eliza had produced a small, ornately carved wooden box, its surface smooth and worn from countless touches. "This, my dear," Eliza said, her eyes twinkling with a shared secret, "is our chronicle box, a place for unspoken words, for stories yet to be told, for echoes across time." Inside the box, Eliza placed a small, tarnished silver locket that had belonged to her own mother. "For memory," she said. Then she added a pressed white rose, its petals fragile as old lace, for beauty that never fades. Finally, she took a long, thin scroll of parchment, tied with a thin silk ribbon. Its edges were browned with age, its surface covered in Eliza's elegant, looping script. "And this," Eliza explained, her voice hushed, "is a letter to your future self, Sarah, from me and from others. It contains truths you must find and a warning you must heed, a chronicle of our family's history. Entwined with a prophecy, you will open this box exactly 40 years from now, on your 50th birthday, no sooner. The stars will align and the time will be right. Only then will you understand." Sarah, wide-eyed, watched as Eliza placed the scroll into the box, her movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. Then Eliza looked at Sarah, her gaze piercing, filled with a gravity that belied her usual gentle demeanor. "And you, my sweet," Eliza said, holding out a similar, blank scroll. "You must write your own message for your future self. What wishes do you bury? What truths do you hope to find?" Sarah, feeling the profound weight of the moment, took the blank scroll. She thought for a long moment. Then, with childish solemnity, she wrote a simple promise, I will never forget you, Grandma. I will find the truth. She rolled it up, tied it with a scrap of purple yarn from Barnaby's sweater, and placed it carefully next to Eliza's scroll. They buried the box together, their small hands working alongside Eliza's gnarled ones, patting down the earth. The willow tree swayed gently above them, its branches weeping silent assent. As they walked away, Sarah looked back, a profound sense of purpose settling in her young heart. This wasn't just a box. It was a promise, a secret pact with time itself, a beacon to guide her back. Chapter 2. The Practical Life. 40 years later, Philadelphia, 2025. The city hummed with a different rhythm, faster, louder, relentlessly modern. Sarah Miller, now an accomplished 50-year-old architectural engineer, moved through it with efficiency and precision. Her life was a testament to logic, structure, and meticulous planning. Her days were a symphony of blueprints, calculations, and concrete realities. The whimsical, imaginative child who loved fairy tales and whispered secrets with her grandmother had long since been meticulously overlaid by layers of practicality and professional success. Her grandmother Eliza had passed away 25 years prior, quietly, in her sleep, having spent her final years in that small, sun-filled apartment, her mind slowly receding into the beautiful, intricate landscapes of her memories. Sarah had mourned her deeply, but had also, perhaps subconsciously, compartmentalized her grandmother's more fantastical notions. The chronicle box became a forgotten relic, a sweet, hazy memory from a distant childhood. Her 50th birthday approached, marked in her digital calendar with clinical exactitude. There would be a small, tasteful dinner with a few close friends, a quiet celebration. No grand parties, no dramatic gestures. Sarah preferred order. It was Liam, her oldest and dearest friend, who jolted her memory. Liam, a history professor at the University of Pennsylvania, with a memory like an archival library, called her the week before her birthday. "Hey, birthday girl," he greeted, his voice warm. "Remember that weird little box we buried in your grandma's garden? The time capsule? Your 50th, isn't it? That was the date Eliza set, right?" Sarah paused, a cup of coffee halfway to her lips. The chronicle box. The weeping willow. Eliza's hushed voice. A faint, almost forgotten scent of lavender and old paper wafted through her mind. "Liam, I completely forgot about that," she admitted, a rare note of surprise in her voice. "Honestly, I thought it was just one of Eliza's whimsical ideas. A charming childhood memory." "Eliza didn't do just whimsical, Sarah. Not with something like that," Liam replied, a hint of his academic gravitas in his tone. "She took her stories seriously. And that willow tree is still there, by the way. They preserved it when they redeveloped the property into those townhouses." A peculiar excitement, a sensation Sarah hadn't felt in decades, stirred within her. The practical, logical engineer. A nod to the past, a brief indulgence in nostalgia, before returning to the concrete realities of her meticulously ordered life. On the afternoon of her 50th birthday, Sarah, accompanied by Liam and her closest friend, Dr. Anya Sharma, a no-nonsense medical researcher, drove to the site of her grandmother's old house. The sprawling garden had indeed been transformed into a small, manicured park, surrounded by modern townhouses. But the ancient weeping willow, majestic and timeless, still stood sentinel. They found the spot, guided by Sarah's surprisingly vivid childhood memory. The ground was softer here, the earth dark and yielding. Liam, with a small spade he thoughtfully brought, began to dig. A few minutes later, the dull thud of metal against wood echoed. The box, it was there. Carefully they unearthed it. The wooden box, though weathered and stained by years underground, was still intact. Its ornate carvings were faded, but recognizable. As Sarah's fingers traced the familiar patterns, a profound sense of connection washed over her, an almost overwhelming wave of memory and emotion. With a deep breath, she unlatched the metal clasp. The lid creaked open, releasing a faint, musty scent, mingled with something else, something indescribably old and profound. Inside, the tarnished silver locket gleamed dully. The pressed white rose, though brown and brittle, still held its delicate shape. And then the two scrolls, her small childish one tied with purple yarn, and Eliza's long, elegant parchment scroll, bound with silk ribbon. Sarah picked up her own scroll first. Her childhood handwriting, almost alien to her now, read, "I will never forget you, Grandma. I will find the truth." A small, wistful smile touched her lips. How innocent she had been. Then, with trembling hands, she picked up Eliza's scroll. The silk ribbon, frayed but still holding, untied easily. She unrolled the parchment. The elegant script, familiar from Eliza's old letters, filled the page. But as she read, the words blurred, then sharpened, taking on a terrifying clarity. This was no whimsical childhood story. This was a chronicle, a family history entwined with a chilling prophecy. Chapter 3, The Unspoken Chronicle unfurls. Sarah began to read Eliza's scroll aloud, her voice initially hesitant, then gaining a steady, almost mesmerized tone. Liam and Anya listened intently, their expressions shifting from polite curiosity to rapt fascination. The scroll began as a family history, detailing generations of women in their lineage. The Millers. Eliza described a line of intuitive, sensitive women, often dismissed as eccentric, who possessed a peculiar connection to time and memory. They were called the Keepers of the Echoes, though Eliza admitted the name was often whispered with more derision than reverence. These women, Eliza wrote, had a unique ability to perceive fragmented memories from the future, often manifesting as vivid dreams, strong intuitions, or even fleeting sensory experiences. Scents, sounds, faint visions that didn't belong to their present. These weren't prophecies in the grand, sweeping sense, but specific, personal warnings or insights, subtle nudges from a future that was not yet fixed. As Sarah read, the narrative shifted, becoming more personal, more urgent. Eliza's own experiences with these echoes were detailed, startlingly precise. She described a recurring dream from her youth, a specific piece of music, a chilling scent that had warned her away from a disastrous marriage. Another vision had guided her to invest in a specific, then unknown technology, leading to her unexpected prosperity. Then came the part that sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. The prophecy for Sarah herself. Eliza wrote that in the future, Sarah would become consumed by her work, by the pursuit of perfection, by a singular, all-encompassing project. This project, while brilliant in its conception, would demand an impossible sacrifice. It would isolate her, drain her of joy, and ultimately destroy her most cherished relationship, the one with Liam. It would steal her future, leaving her successful but utterly alone, with a legacy built on a foundation of profound personal loss. The phrase Eliza used was the Glass Labyrinth. Sarah would become trapped within her own creation, unable to find her way out. And then the chilling crescendo. The only way out, Sarah, is to abandon the project before the winter solstice of your 55th year. Let it go. It will feel like failure, like the end of your world, but it is the only path to true freedom, to rediscovering the heart you buried in your quest for the perfect structure. He will try to make you stay. He will tell you it is for the greater good. Do not listen. Your heart will be the true compass. Trust its whispers, not his words, for his words are the chains. Sarah's voice faltered. 55th year, winter solstice, Liam, the project. It was all too specific, too precise. She looked at Liam, who was staring at her, his usual pragmatic expression replaced by one of profound concern. Anya, the scientist, seemed utterly perplexed, her brow furrowed in a mixture of disbelief and fascination. Anya, Liam, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. This is impossible. This isn't real. Eliza always had a knack for dramatic flair, Liam offered, his voice attempting to sound light but failing. But this is incredibly specific, Sarah. A fascinating psychological construct, Anya mused, her scientific mind already dissecting the phenomena. Perhaps a subconscious fear of yours, articulated by your grandmother, who knew you well. But Sarah felt a chilling certainty. Eliza wasn't prone to fanciful drama. Her stories were always grounded in an undeniable, almost tangible truth. And the details, the Glass Labyrinth. It spoke to something deep within her, a nascent, unacknowledged obsession that was just beginning to take root in her own life. She was consumed by her work. Her current project, a sprawling, ambitious urban renewal initiative called the Nexus City Revitalization Project, was indeed becoming her entire world. She was the lead engineer, the visionary behind its sustainable infrastructure and revolutionary design. It was her magnum opus, her legacy. And yes, it was demanding. It was isolating. She had indeed been subtly pushing Liam away, her focus narrowed, her time consumed. And he will try to make you stay. He will tell you it is for the greater good. Who was he? The project's enigmatic lead developer, Mr. Alistair Finch, a man of immense influence and persuasive charm. Finch was relentless, driven, always pushing for more, for absolute perfection. He often spoke of the greater good of urban regeneration, using phrases that were eerily similar to Eliza's warning. A profound dread settled over Sarah. Was this simply a coincidence, or was Eliza's chronicle, her family's legacy of echoes, truly manifesting in her life? The thought was terrifying, yet undeniably compelling. Her meticulously ordered world, built on logic and reason, was suddenly thrown into disarray by a piece of ancient parchment and a grandmother's whispered prophecy. Chapter 4. The Glass Labyrinth begins. The words of Eliza's chronicle pulsed in Sarah's mind like a feverish drumbeat. The Glass Labyrinth. It became the filter through which she viewed her life. The Nexus City revitalization project was indeed becoming an all-consuming force. It was a monumental undertaking, redesigning a significant portion of downtown Philadelphia, incorporating cutting-edge sustainable technologies, innovative public spaces, and vertical urban farms. It was ambitious, revolutionary, and utterly captivating. It was also a beast. Mr. Alistair Finch, the project's charismatic and intensely driven developer, was a man who commanded loyalty and demanded perfection. He possessed an uncanny ability to identify and exploit the latent ambitions of his team. He had quickly recognized Sarah's meticulousness, her visionary talent, and her underlying drive for monumental achievement. He often praised her with words that made her chest swell with pride. "Sarah, you're not just an engineer, you're an artist. This project will be your legacy. It will define urban living for generations. For the greater good, we must push boundaries." His words, once so inspiring, now felt like gilded chains. For the greater good, his words are the chains. Eliza's warning echoed with chilling precision. Sarah found herself working 12, sometimes 15 hours a day. Weekends became an alien concept. Her apartment, once a sanctuary, became a place to sleep, eat, and occasionally review blueprints. The social events she once enjoyed with Liam and Anya became inconvenient interruptions. Her calls with Liam grew shorter, more strained. He expressed concern, gently suggesting she was overworking herself. "Sarah, you look exhausted," Liam said, during a rare dinner together. "The project is important, yes, but at what cost?" "Liam, this is the most important thing I've ever done," Sarah retorted, her voice sharper than she intended. "This isn't just a building, it's a vision, a future." "But what about your future, Sarah?" Liam asked, his eyes filled with a familiar, quiet concern. "What about us?" The question hung heavy in the air. Sarah dismissed it, or rather, pushed it aside. The project, the labyrinth, was too demanding. It consumed her thoughts, her energy. She told herself that once Nexus City was complete, then she would have time for everything else. Then she would reconnect. Then she would live. But the labyrinth was a demanding mistress. Every problem, every setback, pulled her deeper. A critical structural flaw discovered in the initial phase. A budget overrun that required renegotiation and immense stress. A last-minute change in environmental regulations that demanded a complete redesign of the vertical farm systems. Each obstacle felt like a test, a challenge she had to conquer, driven by the fear of failure, the obsession with perfection. She remembered Eliza's words, "It will feel like failure, like the end of your world." That fear, the terrifying prospect of this monumental project failing, was a constant companion, pushing her to work harder, to sacrifice more. She began to notice subtle shifts in her own demeanor. Her laughter became less frequent. Her sleep, when it came, was fitful, haunted by blueprints and deadlines. Her conversations with Liam, once easy and flowing, became stilted, punctuated by long silences. He was trying, she knew. He was reaching out, but she was too deep in the labyrinth, too focused on finding the exit that she believed was on the other side of completion. Anya, the scientist, observed Sarah's transformation with a detached clinical concern. "Sarah," she said one day, during a forced coffee break Sarah had grudgingly agreed to, "you are showing all the classic signs of burnout. This isn't sustainable. Your mental and physical health are deteriorating." "Nonsense, Anya," Sarah snapped, forcing a smile. "This is passion. This is dedication. This is what it takes to build a legacy." Anya sighed. "A legacy at what cost? Your grandmother's warning was about a shattered heart. Your heart, Sarah. Not just a romantic relationship, but your core. The joy, the empathy, the connection. You're losing yourself in this labyrinth." Sarah dismissed her words, too. She couldn't afford distractions. Not now. Not when the project was so close to reaching its critical phase. Her 55th birthday was only 5 years away. The winter solstice loomed. A distant but increasingly menacing date on her mental calendar. She was so focused on avoiding the trap of the project's completion that she was blindly walking deeper into the labyrinth of her own making, unable to see the walls closing in. The prophecy wasn't about an external entity controlling her fate. It was about her own choices, driven by her deepest fears and ambitions. Chapter 5: The Whisper of the Compass. The winter solstice of her 55th year loomed, a dark star in Sarah's increasingly bleak sky. It was December 2029. Nexus City was nearing completion. A monumental achievement of modern engineering. The glass towers gleamed against the Philadelphia skyline, a testament to her vision. Her relentless work, her sacrifice. But the cost was undeniable. Her relationship with Liam, once the bedrock of her life, was fractured beyond repair. Their conversations were now terse, functional, devoid of the warmth that had sustained their decades-long friendship. He had tried. Oh, he had tried. But she had pushed him away, time and again. Choosing blueprints over dinners, deadlines over conversations. He had eventually, quietly retreated, leaving a gaping wound in her heart that she dared not acknowledge. Anya, though still concerned, had grown distant, respecting Sarah's fierce independence, but unable to bridge the chasm of her obsession. Sarah was successful. She was celebrated, but she was profoundly, chillingly alone. The glass labyrinth was almost complete, and she was indeed trapped within its gleaming walls. Alastair Finch, the architect of her professional triumph, now seemed less charming, more manipulative. His praises, once so intoxicating, now felt hollow. He was already talking about the next grand project, demanding her commitment, her life. For the greater good, he'd intone, his eyes devoid of true warmth, only cold ambition. The night before the winter solstice, a fierce storm raged outside Sarah's penthouse apartment, wind rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over her gleaming glass labyrinth. The city lights below twinkled like cruel stars. She sat amidst a sea of blueprints, her mind a chaotic storm of calculations and anxieties. The project was perfect, impeccable. Yet she felt a profound, chilling emptiness. She picked up Eliza's old scroll, its parchment now brittle, its ink faded. She reread the warning, her eyes tracing the familiar words. The only way out, Sarah, is to abandon the project before the winter solstice of your 55th year. Let it go. It will feel like failure, like the end of your world, but it is the only path to true freedom. To rediscovering the heart you buried in your quest for the perfect structure. He will try to make you stay. He will tell you it is for the greater good. Do not listen. Your heart will be the true compass. Trust its whispers, not his words, for his words are the chains. He will try to make you stay. Alistair Finch, his words are the chains. His relentless demands, his persuasive rhetoric. It was all true, all of it. And then your heart will be the true compass. Trust its whispers. Her heart. What was her heart whispering now? Not blueprints, not deadlines, not legacy. It was whispering of Liam's quiet concern, Anya's worried glances, the laughter she no longer shared, the profound loneliness that had become her constant companion. It was whispering of a small girl beneath a weeping willow, promising never to forget her grandma, promising to find the truth. The truth wasn't in the perfection of Nexus City. The truth was in the shattered pieces of her own life. The storm outside mirrored the storm within her. She saw with terrifying clarity that completing Nexus City would not liberate her. It would be the final, fatal step into the Glass Labyrinth, from which there truly would be no escape. Her success would be her prison, her legacy a monument to her own self-destruction. It wasn't about the project itself being evil. It was about her relationship with the project, her obsession, her inability to let go, her fear of failure. This was the true trap, and Eliza, through her unique gift, had seen it. She had tried to warn her. A profound, wrenching realization tore through her. She had been so busy building her monumental structure that she had neglected the fragile, beautiful structure of her own life. Her heart was not just broken in a romantic sense. It was broken in its capacity for joy, for connection, for simple human warmth. She had sacrificed everything for the greater good that Alistair Finch had preached, but the only good it served was her own self-imposed ambition. The clock on her wall ticked relentlessly towards midnight, towards the winter solstice, the deadline, the point of no return. Suddenly, a memory flashed. Eliza holding the pressed white rose, for beauty that never fades. The beauty wasn't in perfection, but in resilience, in connection, in the quiet moments. She had forgotten that. With a trembling hand, Sarah reached for her phone. She opened her email, her fingers hovering over the send button. The message was already typed, drafted weeks ago. In a moment of desperate clarity, she had immediately dismissed as weakness. A resignation letter from the Nexus City Revitalization Project. It was the hardest decision of her life. It felt like failure, like throwing away years of work, of sacrifice, of dreams. It felt like the end of her world. But her heart, now finally heard above the din of ambition and fear, whispered freedom. She pressed send. Chapter 6. The Unwritten Future. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom. Alistair Finch's fury was a force of nature. He called her, emailed her, threatened lawsuits, pleaded with her. He spoke of the greater good, of betraying the vision, of letting down the city. His words, once chains, now felt like pathetic, desperate pleas. Sarah, for the first time in years, felt a quiet strength. She had found her voice, her own voice. She remained firm. The professional world reeled. Sarah Miller, the brilliant engineer behind Nexus City, had walked away. It was scandalous, unfathomable. Many called it professional suicide. Some hinted at burnout, others at a nervous breakdown. Sarah didn't care. The profound sense of lightness she felt, the sudden rush of air into her starved lungs, was worth every professional casualty. Her first act, after the storm subsided, was to call Liam. He answered cautiously, his voice wary. "Sarah?" "Liam," she said, her voice raspy with emotion, but clear. "I resigned. From Nexus City. I let it go." A long silence on the other end. Then a quiet, almost disbelieving, "Oh, Sarah. Oh, thank God." His voice broke. I thought I'd lost you." Their reunion was not grand or dramatic. It was quiet, filled with tentative words, long silences, and the slow, careful process of rebuilding. They talked for hours, for days, for weeks. She shared Eliza's chronicle, the chilling prophecy, her terrifying descent into the labyrinth, her ultimate, agonizing decision. Liam listened, his pragmatic mind grappling with the mystical, but his heart utterly understanding. He saw the transformation in her eyes, the return of her laughter, the softening of her sharp edges. Anya, too, was relieved and supportive. She helped Sarah navigate the professional fallout, offering practical advice and a much-needed dose of scientific grounding. She remained skeptical of the echoes, but acknowledged the profound psychological impact the prophecy had on Sarah, forcing her to confront her deepest fears. Sarah didn't return to the world of megaprojects. She started her own small, boutique architectural firm, specializing in sustainable, community-focused designs that prioritized human connection over monumental scale. She worked less, lived more. She rediscovered old passions, painting, hiking, reading for pleasure. She found joy in small things, in quiet moments, in the warmth of rekindled friendships. She learned to embrace imperfection, to find beauty in the unfinished, in the organic flow of life. The Glass Labyrinth, completed by another team, stood gleaming in the Philadelphia skyline, a cold monument to her past ambition. Sarah rarely looked at it. It was a reminder, yes, but not of failure, of a choice made, of a life reclaimed. Years turned into decades. Sarah, Liam, and Anya grew older, their bond deepening, woven with shared experiences and unwavering support. Liam retired from academia, pursuing his love for travel. Anya continued her research, driven by a quiet curiosity. And Sarah, now in her late 70s, silver-haired and radiant, found a profound, lasting happiness. She was not alone. Her heart was not shattered. Her career, though different, was fulfilling, contributing to the world in a way that truly mattered. She had found the true meaning of legacy. Not in towering structures, but in the enduring strength of human connection and the quiet joy of a life lived authentically. The winter solstice of her 85th year arrived. December 2059. Sarah sat by her fireplace, a gentle crackle warming her small, comfortable home. Liam was across from her, reading a book, his face softened by the glow. Anya was on a video call, sharing news from her latest research trip. Her life was vibrant, full, and infinitely precious. She thought of Eliza, her wise grandmother, and the chronicle box. The prophecy hadn't been about a fixed future, but a warning, a compass to guide her through the treacherous terrain of her own inner landscape. Eliza hadn't predicted a destiny, but a tendency, a potential pitfall based on Sarah's inherent nature. And by understanding that, by hearing the whispers of her heart, Sarah had changed her own story. The unspoken chronicle wasn't just a record of the past, it was a living guide, a testament to the idea that some truths transcend logic, that intuition is a powerful force, and that the greatest freedom lies in choosing your own path, even when it feels like the end of the world. Sarah had found her truth, not in grand structures, but in the quiet, profound architecture of a life well lived, a heart fully open, and a chronicle that had finally found its peaceful, happy ending. Her grandmother's legacy wasn't just stories, it was a lifeline, whispered across the decades, finally understood.